Our names are Déborah Lopez and Hadin Charbel. We are both architects and teaching at the BPro program at the Bartlett, where we run a cross-research cluster under the title Monumental Wastelands. We also operate an architecture design studio called Pareid that toggles between research and projects that often involve collaborations with other disciplines. Our work in academia and practice addresses topics related to climate, ecology, human perception, machine sentience, and their capacity for altering current modes of existence through what we call imminent fictions, or if. The point of these narratives is to generate strategies for simultaneously aligning and disrupting the trajectories of various realities currently playing out around us.
One such narrative can be located in 1937 at the World's Fair in Paris, which saw the two largest European powers face off in a battle of what were to be pavilions expressed as monuments of their respective nations, the one on the left being that of the Third Reich, and the one on the right of the Soviets. In 1943, the 9 points of monumentality were published, defining a monument as intended to outlive the period which originated them, and constitute a heritage for future generations, forming a link between the past and the future. The same authors then critiqued the monumentality exhibited at the fair as lacking an expression of man's highest cultural needs. Under a contemporary lens, we question if we haven't already begun and are still in the process of making new forms of monuments. After all, are they not the conscious or indirect intention of our collective actions, wants, and in some way cultural needs? And thus, are they not some form of monument to be reckoned with? Here we are looking at these new monuments in the form of marble and granite quarries, which were the materials used by the Soviets in the Third Reich in the previous images, and still very much the basis for the current global production and extraction-driven economy.
Moving into a contemporary context, here are two views of Bangkok skyline on a clear day. And here are the same two views where the haze and pollution has modified the perception of the city by disappearing the buildings from our field of view. This presents a synchronous and biased moment that is shared amongst all of the inhabitants through various forms of media and data. What if those bodies that move, breathe, inhabit, and navigate the various territories of the city could be read as some form of environmental records? In what ways do our consuming, secreting, and shedding bodies produce a material that can be reappropriated into architectural applications? Materially, hair is something that we grow, stylize, cut, and discard repeatedly, and although biodegradable, it is generally treated as most other trash and dumped into a non-discriminated pile of mixed, unwanted waste. However, upon closer examination, hair is a complex matrix that retains the elements that bodies consume, such as heavy metals. Follicle stemmed from the idea to use discarded human hair as an architectural material in the construction of a pavilion, a beacon, laboratory, and parliament that will be used to map the city's toxicity while reassembling the collective in a moment of spontaneity. Over the course of a week, 200 samples were voluntarily and anonymously contributed in a protocol for heavy metal analysis. For now, 50 results have been processed with some initial insights into the relationships between different environments and toxicity and the data that has been used to produce an online and publicly accessible toxic cartography. Visitors to the site can filter by element, district, or observe Bangkok as a network of relations.
Looking back at architecture as a moment for collections and the collective, Pylon-esque was developed examining water as a resource and its climatic extremes, such as monsoons and droughts. This is especially relevant in the context of a school in rural Thailand, where an open-ended space needed to remain flexible while mediating the specifics of its environment and its most valuable resource, water. The structure was conceived as a water harvesting device made up of inverted umbrella modules, two of which are at the core and function as large funnels. A limitation in machinery and labor meant everything had to be mountable by hand, and with just a few people, which influenced the geometry as a structure to perform simultaneously as a makeshift scaffolding. The water is brought into the building and made visible, then guided out via two embedded channels and into a filtration tank system. The surrounding garden hosts a combination of endemic plants to be viewed or interacted with via various pockets and pathways. The school was dotted with unused gym equipment, which were refurbished and connected to the pumps, creating a relationship between playing, gardening, and exercising, a hybrid typology we refer to as a gardenasium. This strategy bypasses the need for electricity in pumping the water out of the tanks. In this sense, architecture is as much an infrastructural element as it is a spatial one, integrating itself into the ecosystem. The look and performance of the project was thought to be a bit pylonesque, nodding to the surrounding electrical pylons and water towers that create a sense of local industrial vernacular.
Extending on the role of narrative and the relationship between the fictional and the real, we have begun examining cases that interlace law and ecology through cinema, which serve as precedents in grounding some of our recent speculative work. A case that was examined was the Phi Phi Islands off the coast of southern Thailand, specifically Maya Bay, where the movie The Beach, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, was filmed, and which since has become what we could call a manufactured nature as a byproduct of the Hollywood industry. Presented as an ideal and picturesque paradise, the perfect beach was achieved through three kinds of operations. One, the virtual closing of the bay by adding CGI cliffs. The image of the left is taken from the film, whereas the image on the right is a tourist recreating the iconic moment, revealing the gap. Two, reshaping the island shores, which included the removal of indigenous plants. And three, the addition of coconut trees, which are not naturally occurring in the islands. Since the film's release, it has seen more than 1.5 million foreign and domestic annual tourist visits, the consequences of which have radically changed the living conditions of humans, non-humans, and the biotope. As of 2019, the beach is indefinitely closed off to the public. This is a moment when fiction defines the real.
In another but different instance of Hollywood, we see the real creep back into fiction. This is a still of Star Wars' film The Last Jedi, with Luke Skywalker standing at the top of his native island Ahch-To. In reality, the island is Skellig Michael and is located off the southern coast of Ireland. In the film, the island is home to an indigenous avian species called porgs. These are in fact modeled after the puffin, a migratory bird who visits the island annually. Because the island is protected, the film crew could not do anything to disrupt the existence of the puffins, which makes getting a clean shot rather impossible. So the best option was to accept their presence and create porgs, which would be CGI'd over every puffin. What's interesting isn't just the move to strategically adapt to the situation and use porgs to mask puffins on the island, but that they ended up being rewritten into the story, reshaping different aspects of the narrative.
The film Rearctic, a fictional retrospective that was done as a collaboration between Document and our office Pareid, plays off of these post-release and behind-the-scenes glitches in the storyline, a collapsing existing legal environment precedent with narrative projections in the Arctic.
As climate change is in its first act, climate fiction is one way by which we can both communicate and explore alternate endings.